Danny DeVito just turned 80 years old. For half a century, he's been one of the most recognizable faces in American comedy. Louis De Palma on Taxi, the Penguin in Batman Returns, Frank Reynolds on It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. He's short, he's loud, he's usually the most dangerous person in the room, and audiences have loved him for it since the 1970s. But behind the career that made him a household name is a much quieter, more physically demanding story. One about a body that has fought him every step of the way, and a man who has spent decades simply refusing to slow down. DeVito was born in November 1944 in Neptune Township, New Jersey, the youngest of 3 children in an Italian-American family. His father ran a small business, and by DeVito's own account, his was an ordinary, blue-collar upbringing, not the dramatic, deprived childhood that tabloid retrospectives sometimes claim, but a modest one shaped by tight-knit family and neighborhood life on the Jersey Shore. What DeVito has spoken about openly, in interviews over the decades, is his height. He stands 4 feet 10 inches tall, and in his early years it was something other kids noticed immediately. He said plainly that being short made him an easy target for teasing when he was young, and that for a while he wasn't sure how that would shape his life. Rather than dwell on it, though, he leaned into his personality. He said that growing up, he figured out early that charm and humor could do a lot of the work that height couldn't. The root cause of his height is medical, not incidental. DeVito was born with a rare genetic disorder called multiple epiphyseal dysplasia, sometimes referred to as Fairbanks disease, named for the doctor who first described it in the 1930s. It's a disorder that affects how cartilage converts to bone at the growth plates of the long bones, and it's estimated to occur in roughly 1 in 10,000 births. People with the condition often experience joint pain, a distinctive gait, and early-onset arthritis in the hips and knees, problems that tend to worsen, not improve, with age and decades of physical wear. This is the part of DeVito's story that gets glossed over in the highlight reels. The same joints that have carried him through 50 years of physical comedy, pratfalls, stunts, being thrown around sets by much larger co-stars, are the ones his own genetics set up to fail him early. Before he was an actor, DeVito trained as a hairdresser. He attended cosmetology school and worked for a period doing hair, including at a salon connected to his family in New Jersey. It's a detail that surprises a lot of people who only know him from film and television. But DeVito has talked about it fondly over the years. It was a trade, a skill, something to fall back on, not a stepping stone he planned in advance. Acting found him almost by accident. In the early 1960s, he enrolled at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York, originally intending to study something closer to design or technical work. Once he was there, though, performing pulled him in. He started taking small stage roles, moved into off-Broadway theater, and slowly built the kind of resume that doesn't pay the bills but teaches you the craft. It was during this period that DeVito became roommates with a young, then unknown actor named Michael Douglas. The two lived together in New York in genuinely lean circumstances. DeVito has described those years as broke in the literal sense, scraping together rent, taking any work they could find. The friendship that formed in that apartment turned out to matter enormously for both of their careers. Years later, when Douglas was producing a film adaptation of Ken Kesey's novel One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, he thought of his old roommate for a small but pivotal role. DeVito had actually played the character Martini on stage in an earlier theatrical production of Cuckoo's Nest, so when the 1975 film version came together under director Milos Forman, he arrived already knowing the part cold. His screen time in the finished film is brief, just a few minutes total, but the movie became a phenomenon, sweeping the major Academy Awards categories that year. And DeVito's performance, even in a supporting role, got him noticed by people who mattered in Hollywood. The role that actually made DeVito a star was television, not film. In 1978, he was cast as Louis De Palma. It wasn't an overnight transformation, though. DeVito spent years in the trenches before that, auditioning constantly and landing very little. Actors who go on to long, successful careers rarely talk in detail about how bad the lean years were. But DeVito has been candid that his early career was defined far more by rejection than by momentum. What changed things wasn't a single lucky break. It was that he kept showing up. The venomous, foul-mouthed dispatcher on the sitcom Taxi. It was a gamble in more ways than one. Sitcoms at the time were not seen as prestigious for actors trying to build film careers, and Louis was written as an almost entirely unlikable character, the kind of role that could easily have typecast DeVito into obscurity rather than launched him. Instead, it made him. Louis De Palma became one of the most memorable villains in sitcom history, and DeVito's performance won him both a Golden Globe and an Emmy Award. The show's producers and fellow cast members have said over the years that DeVito brought an unpredictable, live-wire energy to Louis that elevated the whole ensemble. It's also where he met his future wife. Actress Rhea Perlman joined the cast in a recurring role, and the two began a relationship that would last decades. Once Taxi ended in 1983, DeVito didn't just continue acting. He built an entirely parallel career as a director and producer. He directed Throw Momma from the Train in 1987, followed by The War of the Roses in 1989, both of which did well critically and commercially. As an actor in the 1980s, he had a genuine run of hits, including Romancing the Stone, twins opposite Arnold Schwarzenegger, and Ruthless People. In 1992, DeVito and Perlman, along with producing partner Michael Schamberg, founded Jersey Films. It became one of the more influential independent production companies of the 1990s. Jersey Films backed Pulp Fiction, a project most major studios had passed on, and helped get it made on a modest budget. The film went on to become one of the defining movies of the decade. Jersey Films also produced Erin Brockovich, Man on the Moon, and Reality Bites, among others. DeVito directed Matilda in 1996, casting Perlman as the film's mother figure, and it's remembered fondly today as one of the better literary adaptations of a Roald Dahl book. Throughout all of this, the stage work, the physical comedy, the stunts, the decades on set, DeVito's underlying condition never went away. Joint pain and ALS arthritis associated with multiple epiphyseal dysplasia are progressive. They tend to accumulate rather than resolve. DeVito has talked in interviews about how his height and the physical reality that comes with it has shaped nearly every part of his working life, from how directors block scenes around him to the physical toll of decades spent doing comedy that often involves being thrown, dropped, or crawling. He has generally discussed this with a Satan amount of humor rather than self-pity, which is very much in keeping with his public persona. But medical professionals who study the condition note that patients frequently deal with hip and knee deterioration that worsens significantly by middle age, along with a level of chronic discomfort that isn't always visible to people around them. DeVito has never framed himself as a victim of his condition. If anything, he said his size helped his career, making him memorable to casting directors in a way a more conventional leading man appearance might not have. But that doesn't erase the physical cost that's been running quietly in the background of a very physical career for 50 years. In 2006, at age 61, DeVito joined the cast of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia as Frank Reynolds, a role that introduced him to an entirely new, younger audience raised on cable comedy rather than 1970s network sitcoms. The show's creators have said publicly that they weren't sure a star of DeVito's stature would even be interested in a low-budget cable comedy, and that his willingness to join gave the series a credibility and visibility boost it badly needed early on. Frank Reynolds became one of DeVito's most beloved characters, arguably rivaling Louis De Palma in cultural footprint. The role has also been physically demanding in its own right. The show is known for elaborate, often degrading physical comedy, much of which DeVito has performed himself well into his 70s. It's Always Sunny is now among the longest-running live-action sitcoms in American television history, and DeVito has remained part of it for close to 2 decades. DeVito and Rhea Perlman married in 1982 and had 3 children together, Lucy, Grace, and Jake. For 3 decades, they were considered one of Hollywood's more stable long-term couples, notable in an industry where celebrity marriages often don't last. In 2012, however, the couple separated after 30 years of marriage. They later reconciled for a period before separating again in 2017. What stood out to people who followed the story is that the two never formally divorced, despite living apart. They've continued to describe themselves as close, have appeared together publicly at events, and have spoken about maintaining a genuine friendship and co-parenting relationship even after the romantic partnership ended. It's an unusual arrangement by Hollywood standards, not the clean break of a divorce and not a full reconciliation either, but something the two of them appear to have settled into on their own terms. Now, at 80, DeVito is still working. He remains part of the It's Always Sunny ensemble, continues to take on producing projects, and has spoken in recent years about wanting to use his platform to bring more attention to rare bone and joint conditions like the one he's lived with his entire life, encouraging people, particularly parents of children showing early signs of joint problems, to seek proper diagnosis rather than assuming it's something else. There's a version of DeVito's story that gets told purely as triumph. The short kid from Jersey who became one of the most recognizable character actors of his generation, who built not one but two successful careers in front of and behind the camera. That version is true, but it leaves out the quieter reality that DeVito has spent essentially his entire adult life performing physical comedy inside a body that was never built for it, easily managing chronic joint pain that most audiences never saw, because he generally chose not to make it part of the show. At 80, that's arguably the most remarkable part of his career. Not that he became famous despite his condition, but that he built 5 decades of consistently physical, demanding work around it, without ever making his own discomfort the center of the story. He let the characters be the story instead, and that's exactly how he seems to have wanted it.